Hi and good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Soterion Technical Podcast. Today, I am joined by my colleague, Wehmeyer Ferreira, who is an SAP Senior Authorisations and Security Consultant working at Soterion Technologies. To follow on from our previous technical series videos, where we are diving into technical SAP-related activities, functionality, authorization concepts, and so on, Wehmeyer has joined us today to follow on in the series with a new entry regarding mass maintenance of data subjects in SAP in the authorization space. Today, we'll be going through LSMW or the Legacy System Migration Workbench within SAP, and Wehmeyer will be taking us through how to set up and run these LSMWs so that our fellow authorization professionals or security professionals in watching this video can hopefully take some knowledge from that and help alleviate some of the pressures that come with SAP administration. Thank you very much, Wehmeyer. Take us away.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ross. Also a great introduction to what we will be discussing with regards to the Legacy System Migration Workbench. Great. So as I said, we'll be discussing the LSMW transaction today. Once you enter the transaction, you come into the project selection screen. Now, the project selections, I'm going to start from a blank perspective today so that we can take us through every single step of the way. The LSMW's main function, I would say, in a security and authorizations perspective, is to simulate user input by recording transactions and replaying them with new data. So in the scenario that we're discussing today of mass deletion of roles, I have got this requirement will come up from time to time if roles have been marked as redundant in your environment. And then instead of going into PFCG time and again, you can simply create an LSMW, import the file, and run it against the recording that we are going to set up and that you have set up in the past. So just to make sure that I'm not lying to you guys, I just want to show you that in our table, AGR text, we do in fact have a list of roles that are marked as redundant. We've got 497 roles that are marked for deletion. And we now are going to create the LSMW to simply extract that list into an Excel format and delete them. So for this purpose, I am going to call the project the text series. So every project can have multiple sub-projects. And the project is where you keep your recordings and your LSMWs in order. So today we are discussing role deletion. So the sub-project will be roles, and of course also use users if you have to update email addresses, reset passwords, all depending on your needs. And the object will be role delete. Okay, now just to give them a little bit of background, we are going to give them descriptions, just a definition, and this we'll see multiple times where there is a technical name and then just a definition that needs to be inserted. All free text, so no stress. Sub-project being what we are changing, and it is roles, and then the role delete is the role deletion. So LSMW says, well, try keeping it as simple as possible. It doesn't help that you try to perform too much at once. So if you can break up a step into 2 or 3 LSMWs, 2 or 3 mass actions, I would recommend that, as the more complicated an LSMW is, the harder it is to keep track of what your source fields are, what structure relationships you have in place, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so then your landing screen, these are the steps that you need to go through with regards to every LSMW that you create. But once a LSMW has been created, you can start by specifying files. So what we're going to do as well, you'll see if you go into an LSMW at the first time, your double click will be displayed. I recommend putting on your double click as change so that we can go into the defining of the object attributes. So this is where we define the project. Mostly you define the object, and most important, you choose the recording method. So you can see it's our object that we've set up. That's the role deletion. And what we are looking at is the batch input recording, because this simulates the user input by recording transactions and replaying them with new data. So they might be recordings in your environment already that you can use, can change. Today we're starting off fresh, so we select the batch import recording radio button. We go to recording overviews, and as you can see, it's blank over here, and we are going to create a recording. So the recording name will be role delete. As I said, try keeping everything as much aligned so that when you put your source file together, it makes sense to you. Then we go to the transaction code, as the batch input recordings will always run off a transaction code. And for these purposes, it will be PFCG that takes us into our role maintenance view. As I mentioned, we've got a list of roles that we need to go and delete. To create the reporting, take the first role, paste it in there, hit the delete button, and once that has happened, the recording will take place and give you the recording screen. So now in the background, this is what has happened. The transaction that's been executed, what fields has been populated, and the actions that's been taken in this recording. Very important over here, all of the highlighted fields are the fields that you need to maintain. Maintain a field simply by double clicking on the highlighted area. We can see that this is the role name. So I always like using AGR name for my name. And then over here for the description again, we can just say role name for deletion. Okay. Default value, very important. Let's keep it blank, as if you populate the default value for this recording, it's constantly going to be looking for the default value instead of going down your spreadsheet's list and selecting the next role for deletion. Oh, once you have got the recording set up the way that you want it, you hit the save button. And we can then exit. Here we see now where we previously had a blank field, we now have got a role DEL recording, which we will then, of course, need to go and populate into our LSMW field where we have a recording over here. We can put in role DEL. Okay, then it pulls through as the role delete recording, and your batch input has been set up. This is by far the most complex part of the LSMW, as after we have now told the program what it needs to do repeatedly, we can then just save it and go back to our workbench steps to complete the followings. Okay, so then if we look at the next step below, you'll also see that the LSMW transaction moves you down a step every time you complete a function. So when we're looking at the source structure, this is the hierarchy of the input folder. In the security environment, it is very simple to create, as it would 9 out of 10 times be a spreadsheet that you have got a list of roles, a list of users, a list of passwords that need, or users that need new passwords, and so forth and so forth. So the source structure is generally a spreadsheet. You save it and you go back. Once again, it's dropped you down to step number 3. So the source fields, this is where we define the fields within the structure. So the type and the length of the fields in general. Select the spreadsheet, that's the source field. Then we have got the field name. This relates back to your recording method and the fields that you have defined in your recording. So the field names that we are looking at will be your AGR name. And then, of course, we can just put the role name to delete. The field length, it does not matter if it is over the requested field length. We will get a warning about that a bit later. And I always like making the field length as long as possible, because sometimes if you have got a field length of, let's say, 10, but your system requires a password of 15 characters, then your field length will be insufficient and the LSMW will fall over. We don't change anything else on this source field view, and we say, and we save this as is, as we only have got our role name in our source field. Okay, then we go to the structure relationship. This is now where we use the source structure, the source fields, to create a structure relationship. So this is how the source structure map to target the SAP structures, in short. Okay, select it, create the relationship, and then we can see that a source structure is already assigned to the target, and that is role delete. Coming back to our object attributes. Okay, cool. Save it, nothing to do there, and then we go to the mapping and conversion rules. So here we map the source fields to the target fields, applying the logic that we now have set up together. In this view, we can see the fields, the AGR name, and now we go and take a look at what the source field would be for this. Here I said we'll get that warning where the source field is longer than the target fields. So that's okay, because we know that we have got the roles that are marked for deletion, that they can now be sourced, transferred to the LSMW, and then deleted as we have set up the role delete input recording. Once we have attached the source field, we save it again, go back out, and this is the one step that we do not maintain from a securities perspective or from authorizations perspective, because we don't really have fixed values. You can use this if there is set fixed values like your company codes, or if you are populating org levels or something like that. But for this recording's purpose, I will be skipping over the fixed value. Now this LSMW has been written. The reporting has been done. We've defined the source structures, defined the source fields. There's a structured relationship, and most importantly, there's a field mapping and conversion rule. This recording, of course, can be used by anybody who's got access to the LSMW and access to the project and sub-projects. So having created this might have taken you some time, but now at any time when you want to delete a list of roles, you can just come in here and start at specify files. Now, to do that, of course, you do need to do a little bit of spreadsheet work, where I'm sure that every little bit of spreadsheet work, where in this case, we've got a list of roles that are earmarked for deletion. These roles need to go into the structure that we have provided. So if we look at the define source field, we can see that it's a spreadsheet, and it is a single column where the role name is populated that's been earmarked for deletion. Okay. For those purposes, we take our list of roles that are marked for deletion, we save it. Now, also very importantly, we save it as a text tab delimited, as SAP does tend to read text tab delimiteds a lot simpler, but as it is in a table structure that we'll look at in the next step. SAP just likes having text tab delimited instead of your normal Excel file. Okay, great. So now that our file is there and ready, we can go into the step that indicates specify the file. So the files, you've got different places that you can import the data from. In this case, we will be importing from the front end. So this is the file that you have now created containing the data with the correct structure. And as we have renamed it now, it is roles to delete. We open up that file. Very importantly, we give the maintenance view a name. Calling it role deletion. The file contents, the data is from one source structure, so it is from a table. The delimiter, we can either have no separator or tabular. Generally, I do like to use tabular, but in this case, we can use no separator. File structure, if you've got file names at the start of the file, the LSMW will ignore the first line, but in this case, the file order matches the source structure. Recording of the end marker, and then we just leave the rest as is and say thank you very much. So here we can see that we have now brought in the file from our desktop, and this is what the LSMW will be reading. We save it, we go one back, and over here we've got assigning the files. Pretty simple step. You just double check what's there. You don't have to do anything. You just have to hit save, go one back, as that will then take you to the reading of the data. Okay, so we do have transaction from two numbers. Generally, I like leaving this empty, execute it. You'll get multiple of these warnings. You can select remember my decision, but allow it, just telling you that it's reading the file that you have now uploaded. You can see that we've got a total of 498 single roles that we are going to delete. So there are 498 line items, which is in alignment with the amount of roles that we want to delete. And go back, then go into reading of the data to displaying of the reading of the data. If you've got a file to load that's more than 1,000 line items, you can then, of course, manipulate the to line. But as we are only looking at 500 line items, the to line does not factor in at this point. So in this file, the conversion that we are looking at, so displaying of the data that's been read, it's coming from a spreadsheet. It is all of the roles that is in that file. And if you go to the bottom, then you will, of course, see that it is all the way to line item 498. Okay. So now the steps that we're going into here, the reading, display, read, converting of the data, displaying of the converted data, this is all just to double check your work. So if you see anything in these screens that look off, so if we're all of a sudden seeing that there is 498 records read, but there's 300 records written, then we know that there is a data misalignment. There is something that has gone wrong in the files that we have assigned. And then our final step is displaying of the converted data. This will then show you all the steps. So we are looking at the role deletion batch import recording. The transaction that we're going to use is PFCG, and these are the roles that will be deleted if we run this LSMW. Great. So creating of the batch input session. This then just gives you a overview of the job that you are going to be running. We always want to keep the batch input folders so that we can see what has been executed successfully or not. And then the LSMW will create a batch input session folder for 498 transactions to be ran in the next step where we just run the batch input session. We select it and we process it. Now, importantly over here, if you process it in the foreground, you are going to have to hit enter 498 times to delete these roles. In the background, you might not have an overview if something falls over. So personally, I like using display errors only. And then when you are displaying the errors only, we can hit process. And then the batch would kick off where it's going through line item by line item, reducing the amount of roles that you have in your system and deleting them as you go along. If you've got a big session, you can then, of course, go into your tables and refresh the data. And there you will see the number of hits going from 482 down to 478 as the program is running in the background and deleting each role. If there is a role on your spreadsheet that does not exist in SAP, you will receive an batch input error. And I do believe that I included 1 or 2 in this file so that we can just quickly have a look at how to handle the batch input errors. Right, so as mentioned, if you get an error in your file, so this role, quite simply put, it is the fact that this role does not exist in SAP. It could be a naming convention that's been different. It is giving you no input data found for this particular environment. You can either manually go and correct the input, or you can accept it, jot this down for further investigation, go back into the batch input session. And then as you are going back into this screen, you are exiting the transaction and batch input. Do you still want to keep the batch input data? Then you say yes. And then SAP will continue with the data, with the deletion of the roles. So just once again, you get an error, you take note of the role that has been mentioned, you go back and you continue with the batch input. If you select no, you will be kicked out of the batch input, and you will now then manually need to go and find where this batch input stopped. So for these purposes, it's always recommended to keep your batch input so that the LSMW input, the recording can keep on going to the next line and to the next line and to the next line. Great, so we should almost be done. This is a subset of just under 500 roles, so I think it was 497 roles. Alternative to writing this LSMW and performing it in a mass processing, you will obviously need to go into PFCG, enter every role, copy, paste, delete, copy, paste, delete. Okay, so great. In short, this is what an LSMW does. It gives you the ability to perform repetitive functions in an automated way. That way, saving you a lot of time during your day, giving you the luxury of having spent less time on manual tasks and automating these tasks in an easier manner. Great, so we'll just have a last little check at our roles table. As we can see, there's 87 roles left in this file. So once that has been completed, we can then take a look at our batch results and see where there was failures and if everything's been executed successfully. Great, so now that our session has been completed, we can take a quick look at the session overview. You can see over here that there has been some errors, but these are the 2 errors that we have noted, the 2 line items that are not on the file, that were faulty in the file. But out of the 498 roles, 496 of them have been deleted. With 2 errors, it is a completed list. Then a final check that's always recommended. Go back to your table that contains that previously contained the roles in your environment. You execute it, and now you can see that there is only one of these roles remaining, but this role was not on my list. Always good to do a little spot check. And you can go and investigate as to why that role is not there anymore, or that role has not been deleted, depending on your criteria of what you need to do en masse. So thank you very much. That is it from my side on how to create a simple LSMW. So back over to you, Ross.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Wehmeyer. It was definitely an informative session. We hope that our watchers will take benefit and hopefully lighten their workloads by use of mass processing tools like LSMW in future. Thank you everyone for watching as usual. If you are interested in any of our other technical series podcasts and how-to videos, you can find them on the Soterion YouTube channel across our other social media platforms. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your days, and we will see you in the next one.